Hello and welcome to July 2026. My name is Lisa Pesnichek and I'm with the Dynamic Self Astrology for Life. And I'm here to bring you the astrology forecast for this coming month. So let's jump in. July is largely acting as the crest of 2026 in many ways. It's heightening the activity and opening the door for new energy to come roaring into our lives. It is a massive month. It's a month with the ability to change the course of important world narratives and also the ability to change narratives within our own personal lives. This is especially true if you have placements at or around 4 degrees of any sign. So take a look at your charts for any placements at or near this early degree. For the most part, it doesn't matter which sign it's in, just these early degrees are getting really triggered. But especially if you have placement in fire or air signs, those are going to be really triggered the most, I would say. So expect this month to progress with great abandon. The months prior have removed the restraints that we've been embedded in for many decades at this point. And this is really illustrated by the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. There's a huge change that we're in the midst of, and that Saturn-Neptune conjunction that perfected in February, but we're still in the midst of, has really been preparing us for the events that look to unfold in July and even into August. So we could start to see what's the meaning behind all of these things that have been falling apart and breaking away and being unreliable. And it could possibly have brought lots of loss or confusion, feeling as though we don't have the same level of control that we would like. And I've spoken to this in my newsletters earlier this year. And we're really starting to see some of the purpose behind that loss and confusion. As we step into July, remember that Mercury is retrograde for most of this month. It's stationed retrograde at the very end of June. So if you're traveling, I know there's lots of summer travel taking place. Be sure to leave time and also mental space for plans to unravel a bit. It can really throw a wrench in travel plans, Mercury retrograde can. But just remember that things are going to reorient themselves and that the universe isn't just trying to make things more difficult on us. It's just trying to give us a moment to rethink how we're operating in the world. It's not some sort of a punishment. It's really there to create more curiosity and maybe get us to slow down a little bit. And just a reminder, I touched on this last month, but the main theme of this Mercury retrograde really has to do with this balance of optimism meeting realism. And so maybe we think that things are going to go in a certain way. This really great thing that's going to happen. And we might have to deal with certain roadblocks or certain realities as part of the situation. So just be aware of that and understand that that's really embedded in this Mercury retrograde. So wherever we think we're going to reach this very optimistic point, understand that there's going to be some roadblocks that you're going to have to deal with. But overall, July really begins with a bang, as well as an infusion of miscommunication and confusion. And that's what we're going to get into as we move forward. And that big bang energy is really connected to this Mars conjunct Uranus. It's a very impactful transit for the United States in particular. It takes place on July 4th and is situated at 3 degrees Gemini, 52 minutes. It's explosive and it's baked into the solar return chart for the United States since it's taking place on the United States birthday. So, what this means is that the year ahead for the United States is sure to be filled with sudden events, volatility, excitement, and even rebellion. Uranus in Gemini already triggers the US natal Uranus in Gemini, signaling a Uranus return, which happens about every 84 years. And this placement is a statement of the American Revolutionary War, which took place from 1775 to 1783, which gave us a sense of freeing the colonies from Great Britain and finding our own independence. At that time, America was largely a rugged group of Europeans who rebelled against the crown in order to gain their independence from rule and as well as from taxation. And it was largely a statement of freedom. And as we know, that's really the core sentiment of being American is this freedom, this independence. I can do this on my own and I don't need oversight. I think that that's something that we're going to be dealing with on a different level for these next 7 years as Uranus is moving through Gemini is how do we reconstruct, how do we live into this promise of freedom and independence as life changes, as new restrictions come upon us, as new hindrances are brought our way, how are we maintaining this spark and still growing in the process? So at the time of the American Revolutionary War, it was largely this new thing happening. But how do you maintain that spark of curiosity and newness is part of the predicament that the United States finds itself in at this time. But the spirits still live strong in the American people. And the US Sibley chart highlights Uranus on the descendant, which is largely what I'm speaking to, stating that the US will remain free and independent of outside rule and figuring out how to do that, and also other ways that that manifests. In the US Sibley chart, Mars is also widely conjunct to Uranus, which means that this upcoming conjunction is what is called a reoccurrence transit. So, whenever Mars and Uranus conjoin in general, which takes place about every 2 years, the US feels this because it is already aligned to the frequency of Mars Uranus. But this is especially true when these planets are also in Gemini. It makes it that much more resonant to the United States chart. So, as early as the last week of June, we could feel the effects of this transit as Mars gets closer and closer to Uranus and into the sign of Gemini. And sudden developments on the world stage could occur, stirring up raw responses and volatility. And we know that at this moment, I'm recording this on the 23rd of June, so towards the end of June, and a lot could unfold between me recording this and putting this out and things happening on the world stage. At this moment, the United States is working to negotiate a long term peace plan with Iran. And with this transit occurring, it's really questionable to me as to whether that's actually going to happen or if it's going to dramatically backfire. And we could possibly find ourselves in a more longer term, more entrenched conflict with Iran, if not even something with Israel, too. I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic to see how that plays out as well. And I recently did a whole presentation on this conflict with Iran and how it lines up with Trump's chart as well as the United States chart and looking at different times when it looks like this could evolve more. And this is one of those times as far as the conflict trying to placate itself, trying to find the peace, but finding that it's not available and that it actually becomes more inflamed. So we'll see how that plays out. But in our personal lives, we can expect to feel a general quickening and even excitement. This is the match that will propel us through the quickening in July. The way that we react to the events of late June and early July could open doors that we were not yet aware of before. The areas of our life where we could have felt in disarray and even loss could be filled with inspiration and hope. So, on a personal level, this could really call in the new, the thrill, the burst of fresh life. So, like I was saying, if you have any placements at this early degrees, especially air signs or mutable signs, then there might be something opening up for you at this time. If we are clinging too tightly to the past, to a narrative that is asking to be released, or maybe just unable to let go of the burden that we are grasping, then this time could feel overwhelming and distressing. And that's important to say, in that Mars Uranus can also bring a lot of distress because it's sudden events that are unpredictable and moving super quickly. So just be aware of that. Be aware of what's happening in your nervous system and how are you taking care of yourself. And remember to breathe. This is a really great transit to remember to tap into your breath. A longer exhale, maybe holding it at the bottom, is so good for that nervous system. It's super easy to do. And just remember that within this chaos, there usually is a blessing within it if we're willing to look for it. So be patient and look for that blessing, and don't run from the challenge. Look the change in the eyes and say, hello, what needs to be done here? Because clearly there's a lot that's asking to be changed, that's asking for new life to happen. And there's really no stopping the wave of change that is hurling at us this month. All we can do, as I said, is breathe, take care of ourselves. As I'm always reminding both you and myself, I feel like this is a constant conversation that we're having. But also to remember to grasp the magic of each moment because it's definitely there. I think that if astrology shows us anything in the world, in our lives, it's that there's magic everywhere and that astrology can even get close to our experiences in such a timely way is magnificent. How magic is that? But then there's magic involved in so much else that we're experiencing on a day to day basis that we often take for granted. So, this is a great time to remember that magic is infused in even some of the most mundane things that we're dealing with in our life. So again, if you have placements at or around 3 or 4 degrees of the mutable signs, which are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, or Pisces, or even in the air signs, as I said, you're more likely to feel this transit. And you're likely to feel this in the earlier degrees of any sign, but also it's likely that this will probably start to kick in either late June or early July. But it does take place on the 4th of July. So happy 4th of July. Hopefully, it'll be a nice, chill day full of celebration and nothing that spikes our alertness. That's what I'm really hoping for this time. So, the next piece that we're looking at is the Saturn and Neptune stationing retrograde. This is a little out of sequence. The Neptune is in sequence. The Saturn's actually later in the month, but it made sense to include them both in the same section. As you know, I take the stationing of outer planets quite seriously. I think that we really feel them, especially when we have any personal placements at or near the degrees that they're stationing at. At these times, planets are very loud due to their incredibly slow or stopped movement, at least from our perspective on Earth. And it is important to say that planets don't turn retrograde or turn direct, they station. There's no turning in the sky, there's just the stationing from our perspective. So, the first couple of weeks of July will highlight an undercurrent of Neptunian essence, bringing to the forefront compassion, creativity, vulnerability, even confusion or boundlessness, mysticism, or again, on the darker side, addiction and deception. Neptune can be simultaneously healing and toxic. It's really easy, I think, with Neptune in particular, because the boundaries aren't there. It's so easy to mindlessly go from a more positive manifestation of Neptune into a more shadowy manifestation of Neptune. And we can unconsciously do that, which is also a Neptunian signature. So on July 7th, Neptune will station retrograde at 4 degrees Aries, 25 minutes, and it is activating this sensitive degree through its station retrograde. At this time of its station, the moon will be positioned between Neptune and Saturn, illuminating the connection and the work that these two planets have been doing over the past year. It's really time to make decisions that prepare us for this new chapter, which is ultimately, I think, a lot of the message of this month in particular. The time is here. We're done messing around. So every time that the moon makes its monthly journey through this part of the sky, as it has several times since these two planets perfected their conjunction in February and about 6 months to a year before that, we're subtly reminded, or maybe not so subtly reminded, that we're in a time of disintegration on some level. The moon is constantly taking the messages of these more outer lying planets and bringing them into our inner sphere. So it's always a good reminder to look at where that moon is. And we need to be malleable like clay because life, be that God, source, whatever your relationship is remolding us into a new and hopefully improved form. So, what can we do to facilitate this process? How do we soften? How do we surrender? How do we trust in order to melt our form towards whatever new curves and edges we're being called towards at this time? So, once the impact of Neptune's station retrograde has washed over us, we will soon step into Saturn's realm. And Saturn stations retrograde on July 26th, so it's much later in the month. And it's doing that at 14 degrees Aries, 44 minutes. But for most of the month of July, it's going to be right around this place in the sky. It's going to be moving very, very slow. And at this point, Neptune may have moved a minute or two. It's still essentially stopped in the sky as well. So, a potent Saturn suggests a time when we need to refrain from excess. There could also be heavy decisions that are made that will take time and effort to see clearly. Topics of discipline, structure, and karma will also be highlighted. In the sign of Aries, we could see continued hasty reactions and topics of masculinity and conflict being brought to the forefront. While the beginning of July blurred the edges with Neptune's influence, the month ends with hard edges and consequences being brought to the forefront. Additionally, these two planets being highlighted in July could deepen the storyline surrounding the Saturn-Neptune conjunction that perfected in February 2026. As I mentioned prior, and we know that this had to do with blurred boundaries and weakened governance, unclear military tactics, and leadership strategy are all up for reconsideration. If you have cardinal placements, which are Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, around and between 4 and 14 degrees, so that's kind of a stretch to the beginning to the middle of these cardinal signs, then you could be more impacted by these planets stationing retrograde in July. So just keep a lookout for that. And then we have the Cancer new moon, which takes place at July 14th at 5:43 a.m. is Eastern time and is situated at 21 degrees Cancer, 59 minutes. Cancer is a sign of home and family, patriotism, protection, memory, and emotions. Cancer asks us to look at the areas of our life that are tender and that need nurturing. Mercury retrograde is conjunct the new moon, stating that there are pieces of information that we may need to retrieve from our memory bank in order to work through past pain. There's also a separating square to Saturn, stating that we may not be able to move forward until these details are worked through. This process could feel underwhelming because of the backward motion of it, but rest assured that the work that we do here will soon catapult us forward into intriguing new landscapes. And then the next piece I'm looking spans basically between July 15th and the 24th. And this has to do with an astrological signature that's called the Star of David. And this is a really monumental moment as far as astrology goes. This is an astrological formation that's super rare. And this isn't a complete Star of David. We're just missing one point, and I'll get to that in a second. But astrologically, the Star of David consists of two grand trines. And in this case, we'll have a grand trine in air once the moon is included, once it passes, and that does so on July 19th. And an incomplete grand trine in fire, which is missing the 4 degrees Sagittarius placement. So if you have a 4 degrees Sagittarius placement in your chart, take a look. This could be especially beneficial for you. You're essentially filling in that missing piece and pulling that energy into your chart. So, really positive placement to have. And as I said, we'll feel some of this building between July 15th to the 24th as the sextiles and trines perfect one by one within the zodiacal minutes of one another. And you can look at my list of transits, which I include in my newsletter and also online. And you can see that we're having Uranus trine Pluto, Uranus sextile Neptune, even Neptune sextile Pluto, all perfecting this month. And each one of those transits has their own story to them. For instance, Neptune sextile Pluto has been happening for over 100 years, and we're almost at the end of it in the next decade. So that's a big deal. They don't always come into exact sextile with one another, but it's happening at the same time that we have this first pass of Uranus trine Pluto, which is also pulling in these sextiles. So it's a really, really powerful time. And then having the personal planets pull that in as well is a big deal. So take a look at my transit list, and maybe that'll give you an idea of what's happening. And maybe even look at the transits around this time, and you'll see so many things at 4 degrees. It's really spectacular. What grand trines mean is that there's flow. There's things happening. You don't have to put really any effort into it. Things are just happening. They're moving, they're manifesting. And that can be great because things can happen really fast. But then the downside is that things are happening really fast. And that can be overwhelming. And as we know, the boundaries, the guardrails have been taken off. And that's largely, I think, has been in preparation for this time when we have all systems go with all of these trines and sextiles happening. And they're in yang signs, which is fire and air. So we can expect that extroverted and action oriented themes will continue to unfold. The air grand trine is composed of Uranus and Gemini, Pluto and Aquarius, and the moon in Libra, taking place specifically, as I said, on July 19th. And the partial fire grand trine consists of Neptune in Aries and Jupiter in Leo. Lots of good stuff happening. There is an important lesson embedded into the oppositions of this alignment, though, which is part of the Star of David configuration. And the one that I'm mostly been focused on is Jupiter opposite Pluto, which perfects on July 20th. And it states that success comes with sacrifice, and mistakes will be made in this time when all things are seemingly possible. And those with power have the farthest to fall, is also, I think, largely what this statement is. This is the audacious dream that the falling apart has been preparing us for, as I said previously. This is the time to take a chance, to make the final call, to hurl yourself full on into that project and allow life to surprise you. And then on July 23rd, Mercury stations direct at 16 degrees Cancer, 18 minutes, ending several weeks of what could have been summer travel mayhem. I personally will be traveling for most of the duration of this Mercury retrograde. Not a great astrologer planning move. I'll keep you posted on our success. Mercury stations direct very close to a square to Saturn. I personally found that Mercury square to Saturn on June 9th brought forward information that I suspect could be turned on its head as a result of the Mercury retrograde. So maybe think back to early June. Maybe you also received some information where you're like, oh, that's putting a big dent on what I was hoping was going to happen, which is largely part of the signature of this Mercury retrograde. And I wonder if this station will solidify the unrealistic nature of those events. My hope for the progress with Mercury in this cycle is that the promised intentions or hopes of his manifestation that looks like it may have been stunted in early June possibly comes in some sort of beneficial manifestation as it conjoins with Jupiter in mid-August. So that's part of my hope. If this is hitting you personally, take a look at what you have at about 16 degrees of the cardinal sign. So again, that's Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. This has been a pretty hard hit area. A lot of good stuff, maybe questionable stuff happening. So 2 more steps here. The next one is nodes into the Leo Aquarius axis. This happens on July 26th when they change from the Virgo Pisces axis and shift into the Leo Aquarius axis. The north node will be in Aquarius and the south node will be in Leo. And this essentially officially moves the eclipses into these signs, although we will have 2 more eclipses on the Virgo Pisces axis in August and another in February. The Leo Aquarius axis can be trying for leadership, since Leo signifies the leader and Aquarius, the people in general. We are encouraged to evaluate the boundaries of leadership and in what ways the common people are being hindered by the power that leadership holds. With the North Node in Aquarius, it is possible that the people could hold more clout within the events that unfold while the nodes are in these signs. The nodes will remain on this axis until 2029. Check your chart to see what house or houses Leo and Aquarius are in. And finally, we have the Aquarius full moon, which takes place on July 29th. It's located at 6 degrees Aquarius, 30 minutes, and is really a potent full moon and one that eases us into eclipse season, which will occur for most of August and into September. Most notably, the full moon is aligned with the Jupiter-Pluto opposition that perfected in the middle of the month, but is still quite close. However, the sun is very close to Jupiter. They actually conjoin just before this full moon perfects that same day, which makes this message quite loud. Its emboldened leadership looks to be taking heavy-handed actions. There's a sense that those in charge can do no wrong, particularly in the environment that they are acting within. There is a chance for success within whatever is occurring. However, there will also be consequences. There is a sense of chaos within the full moon chart cast for Washington, D.C., in that change is occurring and needs to occur and is dependent upon what the leadership and government is doing. Personally, this is a time when the quickening that has been swirling takes some form and allows itself to culminate into something tangible. The full moon is quite close to the partial star of David that was forming the week or so earlier, and the sun joining this picture invites visibility and physical manifestation to take place. However, there is also a reminder of the sacrifice that must be made. A sacrifice always has to be made. In closing, July is sure to keep us on the edges of our seats. July will stir the pot and activate what is ready. If July begins to feel like too much, take care of yourself, of course, as always, but also be sure to jump back in as soon as you can. Life will not wait for you. This month, the message is loud and very accessible. Whatever it is that you have been holding back on, now is the time. Astrology like this is once in a lifetime. I know that this is a narrative that is repeated, unfortunately, online over and over again. However, the astrology this month is particularly spectacular, and I do not say that lightly. You must put in the work, take action, and throw your chips on the table in order to benefit. Trust the process. Sometimes activating the nervous system is good for making us stronger and allowing our boundaries to widen. If you aren't challenged and made to feel uncomfortable, then we're not going to grow. You're not going to grow in the way that was meant for us. So find the discomfort and discover the magic within it. August will usher us into eclipse season. Are we ready? Are you ready? I don't know. We'll find out. We'll be in touch. Lots of love to all of you. Enjoy your summer. Enjoy the excitement. Can't wait to hear about it. Take care, everybody. Bye.